Yehuda Levi, the philosopher, once wrote, he was in Spain, and he said, Libi, ani b'mizrach v'libi b'ma'arav. I'm here stuck in Spain, but my heart is in Ma'arav, is in Jerusalem. And I think that's the feeling of every committed Jew always, but especially after Shiva be'October. I was reading an article the other day. Shiva be'October means the 7th of October, but if you listen, it's Shiva. You're sitting Shiva for October. We are. So what do you do when you are stuck in Mizrach, but your heart is in Ma'arav? You bring Ma'arav to you. So some of you travel to volunteer, some of you travel to express love, to show love, because you couldn't imagine not being there. Some of you are doing everything possible from here. And we as a community, we did all of that, and one of the ways to bring Jerusalem to us is to bring the best people of Jerusalem, those who do the work. And we had survivors, and we had generals, and we have journalists, and we have politicians, and and it's never enough. Because ani b'mizrach v'libi b'ma'arav, my heart is there. So today we have the privilege of listening to Lieutenant Colonel Avital Leibovich. She has been the director of the American Jewish Committee in Jerusalem since 2014. Lieutenant Colonel Leibovich is an expert in Middle East and Balkan diplomacy and in geopolitical strategy, working closely with ambassadors, diplomats in Israel and abroad. She's the first Israeli to be awarded the title of Knight of the Order of Skanderberg by the President of Albania in honor of her work promoting relationship between Israel and Albania. A distinguished career spans over 20 years in a wide range of senior media and public relations positions within the IDF. As head of the Foreign Press Branch, she appeared in thousands of media interviews, essentially serving as the face of the IDF to the international community during critical events such as the cast lead and pillar of defense operations, Gilad Shalit return, and many others. She later created and led the interactive media branch of the IDF spokespersons unit in response to the rapidly growing influence of social networks and internet platforms in the media world. Lieutenant Colonel Leibovich received a BA in English Literature and Political Science from Bar Ilan University and a Master's in International Relations from University of Haifa, as well as a diploma in spokesmanship, communications and public relations from the Department at Foreign Affairs at Bar Ilan University. We're so thankful to American Jewish Committee and to Michael Winograd, for the leader of the organization here in Miami, for always thinking of Beth Torah, bringing out the best people. Please welcome Avital Leibovich to our bima.
6:29 a.m. I'm in my bed, and sounds of explosions wake me up. And I don't live near Gaza. I live close to Tel Aviv. And the explosions were so strong. And they woke me up. And the first thing I did was, I called my parents. My parents are observing Shabbat. And they go to shul, Shabbat morning. And since they don't open any media outlet, they had no idea that something happened, that a war began. I prayed that my father would pick up the phone, because in Shabbat he doesn't pick up the phone, but if someone calls my parents in Shabbat, they know that something is wrong. Luckily, he picked up the phone. It was 6:45. I told him two things. Number one, prepare the shelter, make sure the window, the shutters are all closed. And number two, open a radio station so you can hear directions, and of course you're not going to synagogue. An hour later, the municipality sent vehicles with megaphones around the shuls, asking the people who prayed inside to leave immediately and go home. After I spoke with my father, I woke up my husband and my kids at 2 p.m. that day, October 7th, I got a phone call from my commander in the army asking me to pack a little bag and uniform and come to the base. My base is in the north, the Northern Command, 2.5 miles from the border with Lebanon. So I packed my uniform, and that's how my story begins. My husband was called to reserve duty in the Air Force. My daughter, 24 years old, Amit, was called to reserve duty in the intelligence unit in the Southern Command. The Southern Command is the command in charge of Gaza. My son, who's 20, Gal, he is in a special unit anyway, combat unit, so he doesn't come home as it is. So at home stayed 3, my 18-year-old daughter, Ariel, who will be joining the army in the summer, and 2 dogs. And that's how we began the war, our family. The first time we met, 4 out of 5 of us, was Friday night for Shabbat dinner, sometimes at the end of November. I want to share with you the current situation on the ground in Israel, 5 fronts which Israel is fighting right now. The main front is in Gaza, as you all know, and here Israel is now operating in the central part of Gaza, looking for terrorists, trying to search for tunnels, looking for storages of ammunitions, and trying to really eliminate additional Hamas forces, and of course search for the hostages. I want to remind us that the main operation goal of the war is to collapse Hamas governance and military capability and bring the hostages home. So Israel will go to Rafah also. Why does Israel need to go to Rafah? Number 1, there are 4 Hamas battalions in Rafah, which Israel needs to eliminate in order to collapse Hamas military capability. Number 2, Rafah is situated on the border with Egypt, 17 kilometers. In this border, there are hundreds of smuggling tunnels, and you can smuggle everything from parts of drones to washing machine to motorcycles to people. The fact that Hamas has a drone factory in Gaza since 2012 is not because Hamas were good students in Harvard in aeronautics. It's because they used the tunnels and they got the expertise. So that's the second reason. The third reason is that there may be hostages in Rafah, and Israel will not rest until it finishes looking in each and every single tunnel. By the way, the initial estimation was the tunnels are 400 kilometers in length. Now we understand that it's a lot more than 700 kilometers. Gaza is the #1 city in the world with such an underground facility. The fourth reason that Israel will go to Rafah has to do with commanders of Hamas, senior commanders. Unlike the IDF, in which the commander is leading and the soldiers are behind him, Hamas is different. The commanders are hiding underground like rats, and the simple soldiers are outside. So for all these reasons, Israel needs to go to Rafah. This will be the last place. Of course, Israel will evacuate the people who live there, just like it evacuated the people who were in northern Gaza, because that's how the operation began, in northern Gaza. And we evacuate by sending them leaflets from the air, telling them exactly where to evacuate. We evacuate by making phone calls. Did you see ever another army who calls people in their homes and say to them, "We know you're there, please evacuate, take a bag, and go to this and this area so you won't get hurt"? Of course, we use local media, we use social media in Arabic, and this is how we convey the messages. All of this will take time. How much time? Months. And from the beginning of the war, Israeli officials said it's going to be maybe even a year. Now, we have great achievements, I have to say. The IDF, just in 5 months, was able to eliminate 19.5 battalions out of 24. Each battalion is approximately 1,000 people. So that's a very, very short time for such an achievement, but we paid a heavy price. More than 600 soldiers were killed, women, men, officers, soldiers. Many of them were from my neighborhood. I live in a military neighborhood. I want to speak a little bit about the grieving, because we haven't yet digested in Israel October 7th. And the situations that we had to face are unbelievable. I can say that all of my children, all of them, all three of them, had to participate in funerals of their friends, which, you know, as a parent, you never are prepared to give your children tools like that. My son was in an operation somewhere, and when he goes on an operation, a military operation, obviously there is no phone, there is no communication. And during the time that he went to an operation, his friend died, was killed in Gaza, from a street next to us. And the commanders were debating whether to disrupt him in the middle of the operation and let him know, or wait till the end. They decided to wait until the end. And usually when the soldiers returned from a successful operation, the senior commanders in the base greet them and wait for them. And this time around, my son told me later that the senior commander asked to see him aside, and my son didn't understand what is the issue here. Took him aside and he told him that his good friend died in Gaza, was killed in Gaza. My son, of course, was shocked. He had no idea. And of course, the funeral already he missed. The army released him so he could go to the Shiva, and the commander told him, if you need another day, please take it. Got home Thursday night, the middle of the night. Friday was the last day of Shiva. He went. My daughter, who's in high school, her best friend, sitting next to her in class, his brother was killed in Gaza, another soldier. So my daughter, 18-year-old, finds herself going to a Shiva 3 times and to the funeral. Now, I want to try and describe to you, how do we respect, just in our neighborhood, 900 houses, how do we respect the fallen soldiers? All the people come out of their homes holding an Israeli flag. Quietly, you can hear a pin drop. We wait until the cars of the family pass us on their way to the cemetery, and then we go inside our cars and we go to the cemetery, to the funeral. My 24-year-old daughter heard about the Nova Music Festival. But you know, kids that age, they come and go, they decide where to go, what to do exactly. And this time she said she won't go to the party, although she was invited. But she has a friend who went to the party and was killed. So she too had to go to a funeral and the Shiva and all of that. So we have in Israel now more than 700 orphans, children orphans until the age of 18 since the beginning of the war. And we're dealing with situations that we have never dealt before. This is the first front, Gaza. The second front is the West Bank. I want to tell you that in the West Bank today, there are double the amount of soldiers than in Gaza. Because in the West Bank, unfortunately, the Palestinian Authority lost governance in some areas. And in those areas, who came in? Iran, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, others. And gradually, the West Bank is turning into this hub of explosives. And you know that many of the communities in the West Bank are just 10 minutes away from Israeli communities. Take the city of Kalkilia. You drive 8 minutes, you're in Kfar Saba. You take the city of Jenin, you drive 10 minutes, you're in Netanya. So almost every night, there's IDF soldiers who are, according to intelligence, going to search for what we call ticking bombs. For those who are planning to be suicide bombers, to stab Jews, to create some terror activities, and they are detaining them. That's the second front, the West Bank. The third front is where I do my reserve duty, the border with Syria, Lebanon. Since October 8, Hezbollah decided that it needs to stand by the Palestinians. So far, Hezbollah has fired, do you know how many? More than 3,000 rockets to Israel since October 8. As a matter of fact, in the last 2 months, there are more rockets coming from Lebanon than from Gaza. Now, Hezbollah is a totally different ballgame than Hamas. We are looking at the Iranian-backed terror group that was founded in the 80s, which has a huge arsenal of 150,000 rockets. Think how many militaries in the world, legitimate militaries, even have this amount of rockets, 150,000 rockets of different strategic capabilities. They also have drones, of course. I can tell you that my base has been bombarded many times. I can tell you that an explosive drone even exploded right near my parking spot. My vehicle was not, my car wasn't there, because if something would have happened to my car, I'm telling you, Nasrallah would have heard from me. But Israel decided to try and give a chance to diplomacy. And there are 3 envoys, one from the US, one from Germany, one from France, who are collecting points as they fly back and forth, Beirut, Jerusalem, US, France, Germany, trying to negotiate. With who are they negotiating? With Hezbollah. Lebanon is not a functioning state. It's a failed state. Do you know that in Lebanon, they don't have a president for over a year because Hezbollah, a terror group, did not approve the candidates? And do you know how much $1 is worth in Lebanese liras? 98,000. So, dire economy, failed state, a country that has been hijacked by Hezbollah, and negotiations with Hezbollah. I have to say I'm not optimistic about the fruition of such a negotiation, such an agreement. And in the next couple of weeks, the Israeli government will need to take and make some tough decisions, whether to deter Lebanon so that 60,000 Israelis who left their homes 6 months ago will return. Now, the north part of Israel is deserted. There's no one there. There are tanks in the middle of the cities. In many, many places, villages, houses have been destroyed. In Metula, which is the northern town of Israel, 25% of the houses are destroyed. And Hezbollah, by the way, is not only firing at houses, they're firing towards sources of income. Wineries, chicken farms, plantations of different kinds. 20% of the eggs in Israel come from the north, for example. They know it and they bomb those chicken farms. Millions of chickens already were killed. And this is a daily thing. Every day Hezbollah attacks 5, 6, 7 times. Including today, of course. Syria is the same front. You know that from 2011 to 2018, there was a civilian war in Syria. Remember that, right? Approximately 250 civilians were killed every week. You know how many times the UN Security Council gathered in 7 years to talk about the dire situation in Syria? Once, twice. Here in 6 months of a war in Gaza, which we did not choose, the UN Security Council gathered already more than 50 times. So Syria has a border with Iraq, and that border is very active, unfortunately, because pro-Iranian Iraqi militias are crossing the border into Syria, ready to fight whatever they need. The fourth front is the Houthis. And I know there's a tendency to mock the Houthis. They have a funny accent, they speak Yemenite, they have funny-looking uniform. I would like to suggest a different option. I would like to suggest listening very, very carefully to what they say. Now, the Houthis are 500 kilometers further than Iran from Israel. And could you explain to me how Yemen, which is the poorest country in the region, has missiles that can reach 2,000 kilometers, can reach Israel? And the answer, of course, is Iran again. For the past 7 years, Iran had financed and filled the arsenal of weapons of the Houthis. A missile like that costs millions. They have tried to fire dozens of missiles from their bases in Yemen towards Israel, including drones. Luckily, we have good defense systems, and we intercepted almost all of them. But the Houthis are not only an Israeli problem. They also have hijacked a maritime route in the Red Sea. And basically, they are attacking vessels, cargo vessels, civilian cargo vessels, which have nothing to do with the Middle East, with Israel, or with anything that has to do with military. Nothing, civilian. Actually, this morning, they published that they attacked 3 cargo ships. Now, the US has built a coalition of 12 countries trying to cope with the situation, but in that part of the world, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't use force, you will not achieve deterrence. The 5th front we have is the front of international legitimacy. Look, the first weeks after October 7th, Israel was embraced by many world leaders who felt the need to come and show their support. They came to Israel, they came to Jerusalem, many of them traveled to the outskirts of Gaza, to the Israeli communities there. They wanted to witness and see the atrocities within their own eyes. And by the way, let me tell you that the first few weeks after October 7th, you can smell the smell of death in those houses. And now, 6 months later, Israel is pretty much isolated. Not completely, but pretty much isolated. Now, what is the effect on our enemies when they're hearing 24/7 from different corners of the world, ceasefire now? Whether it's in the Security Council, whether it's declarations in Europe, wherever it is, Israel needs to stop immediately the war. So what does Sinwar, the head of Hamas, think when he hears that? Do you think it urges him to go to a hostage deal? Or he says to himself, I have food, I have water, I have medicine, I have electricity. Israel will crack under the pressure, the international pressure. I'll wait. I'm also surrounded by hostages. So what's the rush? I have everything I need. Right now in Israel, there is some sort of preparedness, high alert for an Iranian attack. Last week, an entity, a country with very good intelligence hit a building belonging to the Revolutionary Guards in Damascus. In the building were 7 terrorists, and they were killed. Iran immediately blamed Israel and said, Israel will pay a price in the place, at the time that we will find fit. So how do the Israelis prepare for such a situation, which we have never seen in the past? I can tell you that my municipality sent to everybody living in the city rules and regulations what to do in case of a power shortage. And this is not a hurricane. These are rockets that can kill on the spot. What do you need to have in your shelter? What is the emergency number to contact the authorities? Last week, the Israelis stormed the electricity stores looking for generators, thinking that there will be no electricity. Some families have young children. This is a must. Some others need it for medical issues. And we're waiting. I think there are 3 options for an Iranian attack. They will attack for sure. I have no doubt about it. By the way, you probably read that this is going to be this weekend or within 12 hours or 24 hours. I just want to explain. Tonight ended a holiday called Eid al-Fitr. This is the holiday after Ramadan. And of course, the assumption was that Iran will not attack during a Muslim holiday, which they did not. That's why the assumptions is that it's going to be from today in the next couple of days. Option number 1, they will target a base in Israel. Why a base? Military versus military. Military was killed, they will try to target military. Option number 2, as you heard probably, Iran says that this was an attack on an embassy, which was not. The embassy was nearby, but it wasn't an attack on an embassy, but that's what they say. So they can also choose Israeli embassy or consulate buildings all over the world and some sort of an eye, under an eye kind of solution attacks something like that. The third option is that Iran could use its proxies. It has, Baruch Hashem, a lot of proxies, right? It has Hamas, it has Hezbollah, it has Houthis, and they could upscale their reaction. The maximum barrage of rockets we had until now was 100 at one time. So they could decide to use one of their proxies and fire 400 rockets at one time and maybe 50 drones, explosive drones. So that's also an option. I think they would go to option number one, but we will know in the coming days. I do want to say that the Israelis are very strong people and resilient. And I've been here in the past week meeting with a lot of folks from the Jewish communities here in Florida, and I'm traveling also to other states. And I know I'll be taking back to Israel your support, your warmth, and everything that you do. As a matter of fact, I'm planning to meet with the Minister of Diaspora when I return and convey to him the strength of the communities here, although I know you have your own challenges. So with that, thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to me. And I'll end with Am Yisrael Chai.
So thank you for your holy work, leaving your family and coming to this, your family.